One morning in June, a fresh breeze wafted through the second-floor window of the Miller's white colonial house. "Ethan, hurry up. You'll miss the bus." Jennifer called up the stairs while preparing breakfast in the kitchen. The savory aroma of eggs and bacon filled the air. "Coming." 8-year-old Ethan's energetic reply echoed from upstairs. Jennifer couldn't help but smile at the sound of his feet thundering down the stairs. "Good morning, honey." Michael entered the kitchen wearing his navy suit. With his usual gentle smile, he kissed his wife's cheek. "I have a showing for a big property today," Jennifer said. "It's a new construction on Greenwich Avenue. If I can close this deal, I'll be halfway to my yearly target." "You'll do great." Michael gazed at his wife with warm eyes. "Nobody can negotiate like you." Just then, Ethan appeared wearing his baseball uniform. "Dad, are you coming to my game today?" Michael's expression turned slightly troubled. "Well, I have an important meeting today. But if it ends early, I'll definitely be there." "Promise?" "Promise." As everyone was about to start their day, Jennifer's phone rang. The screen displayed her mother-in-law Barbara's name. "Jenny, dear," came the syrupy voice. "About Ethan's birthday party this weekend, I'll make my special chicken soup. And I've already ordered the cake from this lovely bakery I know." Jennifer sighed quietly before responding. "Thank you, but don't worry about a thing. William and I will handle all the preparations. You just focus on your work." After hanging up, Jennifer gazed out the window. Roses were blooming in the backyard, ones Barbara had planted last weekend. Though beautiful, they seemed to symbolize her position in this house. "Everything okay?" Michael asked with concern. "Yes, it's just..." Jennifer searched for words. "I know your mother means well. But sometimes..." "I understand." Michael placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. "But Mom's trying to do what's best for us, in her own way." Though Jennifer nodded at his words, something still nagged at her. Lately, she'd been particularly concerned about her father-in-law William's behavior. While he appeared to be a mild-mannered, intellectual former researcher on the surface, there was something unsettling about the sharp looks he occasionally gave. However, at that moment, such worries seemed like needless anxiety to Jennifer. She told herself they should all just focus on preparing for her son's birthday party this weekend. Saturday afternoon, preparations for Ethan's birthday party were underway. "Happy birthday, Ethan!" Decorations adorned the living room, and colorful balloons were tied to the table. The scent of roses drifted in from the garden on the early summer breeze. "Jenny, let's use the cream-colored tablecloth I brought instead of this blue one." Barbara had been enthusiastic since early morning, driven by her mission to create the perfect birthday party. She was dressed particularly formally, wearing a paisley scarf over her white apron. "But Ethan likes blue. Cream is more elegant. And it'll complement my special soup better. William, don't you agree?" William, who had just come up from his laboratory, nodded calmly, his eyes gleaming behind his glasses. "Barbara's right. Cream is more appropriate for traditional family gatherings." The aroma of chicken soup wafted from the kitchen, Barbara's pride and joy. Occasionally, William would come up from his basement laboratory to check on the soup. Jennifer felt uneasy every time her father-in-law visited the kitchen. "I've added special spices to this soup," Barbara explained proudly. "It's a recipe passed down from my mother." But William suggested a few adjustments. Jennifer frowned. "Adjustments?" "Just minor ones," William interjected. "Using my chemical knowledge to enhance the flavor." Though Jennifer felt uncomfortable with this, she could only nod silently. In this house, questioning William's opinions was an unspoken taboo. "Dad, can I open my presents now?" Ethan asked, his eyes sparkling. In his baseball uniform, he embodied the purest joy in the house. "After dinner, sweetheart," Jennifer gently stroked her son's head. "Grandma made a special soup for us." The living room table was already piled with presents. A particularly large box bore a tag from William. Every time Jennifer saw that box labeled "Science Experiment Set," she felt a sense of unease. "Everyone, have a seat," Barbara began serving the soup. "Ethan, dear, this is Grandma's special soup. Make sure you finish it all." The whole family sat at the table and began eating the soup. It had a warm, somehow nostalgic flavor. Michael said, "It's delicious, Mom," and Barbara smiled with satisfaction. However, within minutes, Ethan's expression began to cloud. What started as mild discomfort quickly turned to pain. "Mom," Ethan called out in a small voice. "My chest hurts." "Ethan." Jennifer rushed to her son's side immediately. Maternal instinct told her something was seriously wrong. Cold sweat beaded on Ethan's forehead, and his hands trembled slightly. His breathing became labored, and his face rapidly turned pale. "What's wrong?" Barbara stood up in panic. "Could it be my soup? But I only used the usual ingredients." "Call an ambulance," Jennifer shouted. "Michael, quickly." Throughout this, William maintained his composure. With a researcher's observant eye, he watched his grandson's symptoms. "Stay calm. It could be an allergic reaction. In my experience." But Ethan's condition deteriorated rapidly. His face was ashen, and his breathing became more labored. His small body shook in his mother's arms. "Mom, I'm scared." Ethan clung to his mother, crying. His voice carried pain and fear uncharacteristic of an 8-year-old. As the sound of approaching sirens grew closer, Jennifer didn't miss the calculating sharpness that briefly crossed her father-in-law's expression. In his eyes, she saw the cool observation of a scientist mixed with something else. When the paramedics arrived, they immediately loaded Ethan into the ambulance. Barbara sobbed while Michael stood in shock. Only William maintained an unnaturally calm demeanor. At the hospital, doctors immediately began treatment. As tests were conducted, hushed conversations passed between specialists. As the examination progressed, the doctors' expressions grew increasingly grave. Mrs. Miller, a young doctor, approached Jennifer. His expression carried a tension unusual for cases of common food poisoning or acute allergic reactions. "Your son's symptoms, this isn't simple food poisoning." Those words triggered everything that followed. The doctor decided to contact the police, and soon 2 detectives appeared. Detective Carter, Greenwich Police, the older detective showed his badge. "This is my partner, Detective Ryan." Jennifer instinctively felt this was a turning point. Under the hospital's fluorescent lights, the detective's expressions looked stern. "We'd like to speak with everyone involved in the meal," Detective Carter announced. "Particularly Mrs. Miller, who prepared the soup." Barbara's face turned pale. I. Mother is innocent," Michael immediately spoke up. "She would never harm her grandson." However, the police began questioning Barbara. The ingredients, cooking process, who had access to the kitchen, the questions delved into every detail. "We'll need to examine the laboratory as well," the other detective stated. William's expression tensed momentarily. "My laboratory?" "Yes. We need to consider the possibility of harmful substances." At these words, Jennifer observed her father-in-law. Beneath his usually mild expression, she sensed something else lurking. "I understand," William replied calmly. "However, there are confidential research materials. We already have a warrant." The police investigation proceeded swiftly. The Miller's kitchen was completely sealed off for evidence collection. Forensics team members in white protective suits carefully examined each cooking utensil. Meanwhile, at the hospital, new facts came to light. "We've detected organophosphate compounds," the young doctor reported. "These aren't typically found in normal food ingredients." This report dramatically changed the direction of the investigation. Detective Carter immediately ordered a search of William's laboratory. What they found in the basement laboratory revealed everything. Encrypted notes in experimental notebooks. Trace amounts of organic compounds. And most surprisingly, a detailed plan hidden behind a photo of his first wife, Rachel. "William Miller," Detective Carter announced. "You're under arrest." At that moment, Barbara's anguished cry echoed through the hospital corridor. "William, why?" Michael stared at his father in disbelief. "Dad, why?" But William's expression was no longer that of the mild-mannered scientist. What showed now was another face he'd hidden for years, a mixture of madness and obsession. "I did what was right," William said quietly but with conviction. "To protect this family, to keep my promise to Rachel." Jennifer instantly understood the meaning of those words. Her father-in-law had seen her as someone who tainted the family's pure blood. Perhaps her middle-class background made her a threat to the Miller family lineage. Just then, a doctor emerged from the ICU. "Ethan's condition has stabilized." At those words, Jennifer finally let her tears flow. But this wasn't an ending, it was a new beginning. Family bonds would be tested in ways they never imagined. Michael was overwhelmed with complex emotions as he watched his father being handcuffed. The father he'd respected since childhood. The pride of being a scientist. And the madness that had lurked beneath. Barbara had collapsed on the spot, unable to accept the reality of discovering an unknown side to her husband of over 30 years. The police continued searching the Miller house for more evidence. Shocking evidence kept emerging from the laboratory. It became clear that William had been meticulously planning for a long time. Such extensive preparation. Detective Carter muttered while examining the evidence. A perfect scientist's precise planning. That night, Jennifer and Michael sat silently in the hospital hallway for a long time. Moonlight streaming through the window cast their long shadows on the floor. "Jenny," Michael quietly began. "I think I somewhat understand how Father felt." Jennifer caught her breath at those words. "But it was wrong," Michael continued. "Family isn't just about blood ties. You and Ethan are my real family." Those words were also a declaration of resolve for the battles to come. Accepting the truth, healing wounds, and building a new kind of family, it was the beginning of a long, difficult journey. The Connecticut Superior Court was filled with tension. William Miller sat in the defendant's seat, his appearance far from that of the proud researcher he once was, looking worn as he faced the court. Prosecutor Sarah Cohen addressed the court powerfully. "This case isn't merely a domestic incident. This is an attempted murder case where scientific knowledge was deliberately misused. The research notes presented as evidence showed detailed plans for administering trace amounts of organophosphate compounds. It was as meticulously calculated as a clinical trial for a new drug. The defendant used his chemical knowledge to attempt the perfect crime," the prosecutor continued. "However, it was an act that could have killed his grandson." Expert testimony continued in court. Toxicologists, psychologists, and the defendant's former colleagues. Through their testimony, William's double life came to light. On the surface, he was a mild-mannered, honest scientist. But beneath lay an obsessive perfectionism and desire for control. In particular, many testimonies pointed to his abnormal attachment to his late wife Rachel. "My promise to Rachel was absolute," William testified quietly. "Protecting my son and grandson was a sacred mission." At those words, Jennifer covered her eyes with trembling hands from the gallery. Michael continued to stare silently at his father. The defense focused on William's mental state. "My client has suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder since his wife's death," defense attorney David Morrison argued. "His actions were taken while his judgment was impaired." But the prosecution's rebuttal was sharp. "Look at the defendant's research notes," Sarah Cohen addressed the jury. "This isn't the product of a confused mind. It shows extremely methodical, scientific preparation." Outside the courthouse, media coverage continued daily. Renowned researchers' betrayal of family, tragedy born from scientific knowledge, headlines continued to draw public attention. Barbara watched the trial through a monitor in a separate room. Each revelation of her husband's unknown side made her wonder if their 30 years of marriage had been an illusion. At times, she blamed herself for not noticing her husband's changes. "I bear some responsibility," Barbara confided in Jennifer. "I should have noticed something was wrong with him in the kitchen that day." But Jennifer gently squeezed her mother-in-law's hand. "No one could have known. You can't blame yourself." In court, Ethan's primary physician also took the stand. The patient's symptoms clearly resulted from planned poisoning. One misstep could have been fatal. Hearing this testimony, Jennifer remembered that day at the hospital. Her son's suffering. And her father-in-law calmly observing nearby. In retrospect, those weren't the eyes of a concerned scientist, but of a researcher monitoring an experiment's progress. As the trial progressed, William's complex psychology came to light. How he had distorted his promise to his first wife Rachel to protect their son and grandson. How he had viewed Jennifer, from a middle-class background, as someone who would taint the family bloodline. And how he had misused his scientific knowledge to try to eliminate her. In the final stage of evidence examination, a decisive piece was presented. A note hidden behind Rachel's memorial photo, discovered in William's laboratory. "Beloved Rachel," the note began. "I will keep my promise to protect Michael and our grandson from unworthy blood." Those words hit Michael with a wave of intense emotion. Father completely misunderstood Mother's words, he whispered. All Mother wanted was the family's happiness. In closing arguments, the prosecutor appealed to the jury. The defendant's actions not only violated scientific ethics but denied the most basic human values. We seek a severe sentence. The defense maintained their argument about diminished mental capacity until the end. However, faced with evidence of meticulous planning, their argument lost power. Deliberations lasted 3 days. Then came time for the verdict. Defendant William Miller, the judge's voice resonated through the courtroom. Based on the jury's verdict, this court finds you guilty of attempted murder. The sentence was 15 years. While there were mitigating circumstances, the premeditation and danger were heavily weighted. After the sentencing, Jennifer and Michael sat wordlessly on the courthouse steps for a long time. Spring sunlight cast their shadows long. "It's finally over," Jennifer whispered. Michael embraced his wife's shoulders. "No, this is a new beginning. As our real family." A long road lay ahead of them. Healing wounded hearts and building new family bonds, it wouldn't be easy. But they believed that overcoming this trial would create stronger bonds. Above all, restoring Ethan's smile. That was their greatest challenge now, and their hope. A week after the sentencing, Ethan finally returned to school. That morning, he told his mother, "Mom, I'm not scared anymore." Those words heralded the beginning of a new chapter. About an hour's drive from Greenwich, in the suburbs, stood the Millers' new home. Though not as large as their previous house, the white colonial home was surrounded by bright sunlight and green gardens that soothed their hearts. 3 months after moving, on an autumn holiday, Ethan was practicing baseball in the backyard. "Nice catch." Michael's voice rang out. The father and son's smiles brought warmth to their new home. In the kitchen, Jennifer and Barbara were preparing lunch. Their relationship had actually deepened since the incident. "Ethan's smile has returned," Barbara said while cutting salad. She never missed their Sunday lunches together. "Yes," Jennifer answered, gazing out the window. "The counselor says Ethan's recovery is going well." The whole family continued their sessions with the psychological counselor. The counselor saw positive changes in how the family was working to overcome their trauma. "You know," Barbara set down her knife and began quietly. "I still receive letters from William." Jennifer listened silently to her mother-in-law's words. "But I've decided not to open them anymore. The past is the past, I need to look forward." Jennifer gently squeezed her mother-in-law's hand at these words of resolve. After lunch, the family visited a nearby park. Under trees beginning to show fall colors, Ethan played with his new friends. "Dad, watch this." Ethan called as he jumped from the swing, making Michael instinctively lean forward. "Be careful," he called out, though his expression remained peaceful. He could now simply enjoy his son's growth. At dusk, as the family sat around the dinner table, Ethan suddenly said, "I think about Grandpa sometimes." For a moment, the air seemed to freeze. But Michael looked straight into his son's eyes and answered, "Grandpa made wrong choices. But that's never your fault." "I know," Ethan nodded. "My counselor told me that when hard things happen, getting through them makes you stronger." At those words, the whole family exchanged warm smiles. Time doesn't heal all wounds. But this family had certainly gained the strength to accept their wounds and live with them. That night in their bedroom, Jennifer snuggled close to her husband. "We're going to be okay." Michael embraced his wife. "Yes, we will." Outside the window, the full moon quietly illuminated the sky. The moon seen from their new home's window seemed larger and brighter than before. It felt like a hopeful light shining on this family's future. From Ethan's room came the sound of steady breathing. He was rarely troubled by nightmares anymore. Tomorrow would bring another new day. While the past cannot be erased, the future can be shaped. The Miller family now held this certainty within them.